South fans, I thought I'd do a quick analysis of our game against Green Gully. Of course, it was an emphatic 1-3 victory to the mighty blue and white of South Melbourne. I felt, it was a dominant performance from South Melbourne. Granted, Green Gully are a very, very good opposition. They have great players. I think they potentially have, obviously I don't have the fact sheet, but I would say a budget in the top 3 to 4 teams in the league. Quality players all over the park. Yet South Melbourne managed to go to, Green Gully, a place which traditionally has been a very tough stomping ground for South Melbourne. Sure, we did win there, I believe, in very, very recent times with a Marcus Schroen winner. Could have been last season from memory. But traditionally, very, very difficult place for us to go and win. Yet this past Monday, I felt we did it quite comfortably. Of course, we were helped by a red card by Iannucci. I mean, after that point, really South Melbourne were able to create chances regularly. Many will say that, Green Gully dominated the ball at times. They had better possession. But again, it comes down to, what do you do with the ball? What chances do you create? Ultimately, they did score a scrappy goal when they were down to 10 men. I think that one goes down as potentially poor defending from South Melbourne as opposed to Green Gully, causing the South Melbourne defence big problems. But what I was really happy with, South fans, was, after that initial 15-20 minute period where Green Gully, may have had more of the ball, were looking potentially a bit dangerous. But again, I question, what does looking potentially a bit dangerous look like if you're not forcing the keeper to make saves, if you're, not really stretching the defence, if you're not getting shots on target? I'd like to put it out there that, obviously we've seen some great football teams in Europe in particular who have popularised, possession-based football. I talk about Barcelona, I talk about Manchester City. But, after those two clubs, there's not many that I can talk about that popularise that game because it requires, 11 players who are phenomenal on the ball. And who can execute, obviously, the tactics of a coach like Guardiola. So probably also requires Guardiola as coach as well, to be fair. And, that style of football works great for, that great Barcelona team and Manchester City. But, in other, parts of the world or in other leagues or in other great teams, are usually put together towards the strength of their players. And what I'm seeing at South Melbourne this season, South fans, is a team that's starting to evolve into a very, very efficient and highly dangerous team, especially on the counter-attack. Like the score was 3-1, but, when I look at, for example, Ajak Riak, who scored a one-on-one, scored a brilliant individual goal for his second. Let's not forget in the first half, Max Mikela had scored a wonderful chip over the Green Gully keeper to open the scoring. But also, Ajak Riak looked like he was about to open his account for South Melbourne. Again, with the chip over keeper Driscoll, the ball went just wide. I remind you of the fact that he also created another chance effectively on his own, which was saved, I believe, by Driscoll onto the post. He had a header from across from the right, angled header that again forced Driscoll into a big save. It's 5 chances alone for Ajak Riak. And what I'm trying to say is now having, and it's not only on Ajak Riak, but having Ajak Riak in the attack, a player, as we talked about in my last post, that has multiple elements to his game. It's like having a superhero in the front third. He is quick, he is tall, he can jump high. He has good technical ability. He can create chances for himself. He will shoot. All right, so automatically having those characteristics, a player who can get in behind like Ajak Riak can, all of a sudden gives you the ability to counter on the ground. And we saw that, South fans, when Andy Brennan picked up the ball when it was 1-1. Big mistake from Green Gully. Brennan picked up the ball, played Ajak Riak through on the ground. He was never going to be caught because he's quick. He gallops basically like a horse, very similar to Vaughan Coveney in that respect. And it was a great finish past Driscoll to make it 2-1. Of course, his individual brilliance to make the score 3-1 is the goal, that many will remember in terms of Ajak Riak putting his stamp on South Melbourne. But, the thing that excites me is having a player that allows us to play a different way or have different elements. Too many people overlook the fact that when we had Harrison Sawyer last year, and he's a superb player, and I think we'd take him back at any moment in time, as well as any club in Australian football would take him back as well. But we set up to play to Harrison Sawyer's strengths, okay? He did not have the same ability to break in behind a defence as Ajak Riak, all right? Maybe that's why the centre midfielders or the midfield players of South Melbourne weren't playing balls in behind all that often. We've seen multiple times already in the first 2 games this season, and we saw it in particular against Green Gully, that with Ajak Riak, our midfielders will look for him in behind, okay? Just having that different characteristic of player brings a different element to the game. And then, having players like Suleimani, like Brennan, like Mikola, like Schrone, like even Langlois, who obviously is a player that drives and is very, very dangerous at any given point of the game, is really it's amazing. And I pointed out in my post-match video post that we still have players out like Hancock, who I'm telling you is going to be pushing for the first 11, a very, very good defensive midfielder who can also play centre back with a good passing range. Obviously, Marko Jankovic is available again against the Melbourne Knights coming up on Monday. The original Melbourne Derby, the biggest Melbourne Derby in Australian football, in my opinion, on Monday. So Jankovic is back. We haven't seen, obviously, Costa Emmanuel because he's nursing an injury. I'd say maybe a couple of weeks he'd be back. We saw that Wallen and Jibba, I'm guessing Jibba picked up an injury in the match against Moreland City. They weren't available. Wallen, as mentioned, he didn't play either. We saw the debut of George Tsitsinatis, which was great, even though it was only maybe a minute or 2 in length. I've seen him play in pre-season. He is a good player, South fans. But we also had Jack Painter-Andrews make his debut at right back. Came in like he'd been a South Melbourne player for years. Did a very, very good job on the right-hand side. I think it's obvious watching him play that he has, really, really good feet. He really wants to bomb forward. He's a player, I think I mentioned in my last analysis, that can also play, on the right wing, which gives South Melbourne additional options. So all in all, it's been a great start. Having a squad with such great depth, with such quality, I think will keep us in good stead. We are adding more elements to our game, and let's keep in mind we haven't really integrated Danny Kim all that well. He is a player that plays primarily on the deck. Obviously, he's got good searching balls as well, a bit like a Perlo or a Xavi Alonso. Let's see what he can offer the team, because I think he can offer South Melbourne another dimension as well, similar to what Ajak Riak has offered when he settles and when we play to his strengths, as mentioned in my first analysis last week, that being playing balls to his feet, into the midfield. Ideally, when he has a bit of space around him, I think Marko Jankovic will be perfectly suited to do that. Now, onto the game on Monday. South Melbourne has great momentum, and to the credit of credit to the Melbourne Knights, they haven't lost in the first 2 matches. I've seen them play, actually in person against Eastern Lions. 1 week before the season started. I saw the game against St Albans on NPLTV, most of it. I only saw the highlights of the game against Oakley, where apparently Oakley were dominant at the beginning. Oldfield had a great game, and then the Melbourne Knights eventually got on top and may have been able to snatch it. A stunning goal from the Caracau international. One of the best free kicks you'll see around the world. Expertly taken, channeling players like Juninho Pernambucano. Really, it just shows if South Melbourne is dominating the match, as an example, and has not taken its chances, and Melbourne Knights gets a chance in and around the box, this player can potentially pull effectively magic out of a hat. So, what I did see of the Melbourne Knights, though, both when I saw them in person against the Eastern Lions and also when I watched the game against St Albans, is that they're a much more balanced team. Obviously, they're going to try and keep possession in the spirit, I guess, of Ben Khan, coming from Queensland football. I've read a few articles saying that in Queensland, we're a little bit more technical. I even spoke to one of their players who's come over from Queensland. I think Stephen White, he told me, the emphasis there is maybe on keeping the ball a little bit more. The players tend to be a little bit more technical. It's going to be interesting to see how that works out for the Melbourne Knights in the NPL Victoria. Certainly, though, they're going to be competitive in every match they play because they have quality pretty much on all lines, and they have maybe that extra bit of quality in areas like the goalkeeping position in Oldfield, who we know that if he gets anywhere near his best form, he is a wonderful goalkeeper, one of the best goalkeepers in Australian football. When you've got experienced players like the Franjic brothers as well, and you supplement them with class like Albano. We talked about the Caracau International as well. There's a bit of an unproven player from Perth Glory playing up front. His surname escapes me. I know his first name's Kieran, who I think replaced George Ott, which to me says that, the Perth Glory player, to replace a player like George Ott, who's obviously scored 4 goals in the first 2 games of the NPL of Victoria. He's obviously a good player. And when I saw him play against the Eastern Lions, I could tell he's an impressive player that plays off the shoulder, looks to get in and score, many striker-related finishes, one-on-one with the keeper, side foot finishes. Yeah, so we need to be careful of this player. And yeah, I just hope both sets of fans, Melbourne Knights fans, South Melbourne fans, can find a way to get to the game at 8:15 on Monday. If we can get 2,000 to 3,000 on a game on Monday, I think the weather's going to be spectacular. That's a great spectacle for the people in attendance, for the people watching on NPL TV, and I think for Australian football in general. Hopefully there's a great match. Neutrals are entertained, and hopefully, and most importantly, South Melbourne come out on top. Go South!